Chapter 8. "Jonathan!" shouted Sig as he shook him by the shoulders, waking him up. "Jonathan!" Though he had only slept for a couple hours, the sun had already set and was now starting to appear on the horizon again. "I'm awake," said Jonathan. "Where is Kirana?" he asked. The words stunned him for a moment. "She was on watch," he said. He jumped up and looked around. Her long sniper rifle had been left on the ground by a palm tree. Jonathan felt his heart sink, knowing that she never left her sniper rifle like that. Frantically looking back and forth, Jonathan searched desperately for a sign that his other suspicions were incorrect. "Where is Lizard?" he asked. Sig rushed to the place where Lizard had been. He was also missing. "Not good," said Sig aloud. Daniel, Victor, and Lucas slowly began to get up in the commotion. Jennifer remained asleep. Jonathan felt he could spare no time. He took a gulp at the pool, then gathered his weapons. "Kirana!" he shouted as he rushed into the desert. "Jonathan, wait!" shouted Sig in a frustrated voice. Jonathan ignored him as he located a set of tracks in the dirt and ran off. Sig began running after him. "Hang on!" shouted Victor. He took a large drink of water, filled a canteen, and then ran after the two of them. Daniel turned to Lucas. "I don't think my old bones can move that fast," said Daniel. "I dislike being separated from Sig, but perhaps we can be useful," said Lucas. "What do you have in mind?" asked Daniel. "The soul key," said Lucas. He thought about it for a moment, then nodded his head. "All right," said Daniel. "Should we wake Miss Cedar?" "She's already awake," said Lucas in a slightly annoyed tone. "What?" asked Daniel in surprise. He turned to watch her. She remained still and breathed steadily for a few more moments before opening her eyes and frowning. "How did you know?" she asked Lucas as she sat up. "You aren't the only one who pretends to sleep," said Lucas, "although you might be the only one who does it to procrastinate the beginning of a journey." Jennifer shrugged and got a drink at the pool. "Hang on," said Daniel as he turned to Lucas. "Why do you pretend to sleep?" "I don't always do it," said Lucas, "but sometimes people say interesting things." Daniel scowled. "I can't decide which of the two of you I'm going to lecture first," he said angrily. Lucas and Jennifer looked at one another nervously. In spite of her dislike for Lucas, she joined him in quickly gathering her belongings and rushing out into the desert. "Wait!" shouted Daniel. "That doesn't mean leave me behind." Daniel quickly gulped some water and began following after the others. The chunks of asphalt that made up the hot road guided Lucas, Jennifer, and Daniel as they moved into the desert. The sun burned hot and bright in the sky to the north. The hot breeze tossed Jennifer's golden hair and her dress, but neither Daniel nor Lucas seemed to be affected by her beauty. Lucas clutched his shining key like a child clutching the hand of a parent to guide them through a busy place. Of course they were not in a busy place, but a desolate waste that seemed devoid of any life. Daniel frequently wiped the sweat off of his brow. At length they found a small building on a hill standing out against the bright sun. "That's it," shouted Lucas. Jennifer and Daniel looked at one another with a bit of relief. Neither of them had been particularly excited about this trip into the desert. They slowly walked along the trail of dark asphalt chunks that led to the base of the hill. As they began to climb, the effort required for each step in the soft sand seemed to double. They struggled as they moved up the hill, even though the grade was not very steep. Finally they came to the shade provided by the small building at the top. Together they rested on the ground. As they looked at the building, they noticed a window with broken glass. "I know this place," said Daniel solemnly. "It seems familiar to me as well," said Jennifer. "This is the blood shrine where we first discovered Jonathan," said Daniel. "There were demon worshippers stationed here, murdering people. No one has taken up station here since you rescued him, though," said Lucas confidently. "So a key is located somewhere close, you think?" asked Daniel. Lucas nodded. "But all three of us have keys," observed Jennifer. "How will we even know what it actually does?" "Lucas will know," said Daniel. "But you don't know where my key is from," said Jennifer to Lucas, casting doubt on his abilities. "You mean from where my key came," corrected Lucas. "Really?" asked Jennifer in an annoyed tone, correcting my grammar. "That doesn't change the fact that you know nothing about my key." Lucas smiled and shrugged. Jennifer glared at him angrily. Slowly they climbed into the broken window and went inside the shrine. Sunlight had entered the room from a window on the opposite end. Just as Lucas had said, it was clear that no one had been in the chamber for ages. A thick layer of desert dust covered the large table in the middle of the room, as well as a number of dried corpses scattered about. "Kirana broke through that window and defeated those vile demon worshippers," said Daniel. The scent of death had long since departed, but the dusty red cloaks around the bones of men scattered everywhere gave a sickening feeling to Jennifer. Lucas did not seem to be bothered. "They thought they would become like the Destroyer by butchering victims on their altar, but of course they only wasted precious lives. They gained nothing." Jennifer began to fall down, feeling dizzy, but Daniel quickly caught her. "Are you all right, my dear?" asked Daniel. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples before nodding. "Yes," she said at last, "just a little too much time in your hot zone." Daniel gave her a drink from a canteen. "Don't overexert yourself," said Daniel. She stood up. "I'm fine, doctor," she said gratefully. "Thank you." "Jennifer," said Lucas, "you said you thought this place seemed familiar." She nodded. Daniel scowled. "I just told her not to overexert herself," said Daniel, "and now you want her to strain to find a memory that may or may not be there." "It's important, doctor," said Lucas in an equally reprimanding tone. Daniel frowned, but seemed to withdraw his objection. Jennifer examined a wall on the opposite side of the room. "There was a much larger window here," she said. Lucas looked at the weathered, dusty bricks and blew a layer of silt off of them. Just as Jennifer had indicated, the bricks in that section were newer and had been used to block off an area about the size of a window. Jennifer held her head and slipped onto the ground, losing consciousness. In a dream, she saw her other self on a sofa next to a wall in a room very similar to the shrine in which she rested. There was no table, no dust, and no bodies in her vision, though. She looked over at the wall to which she had pointed out for Lucas and noticed a large star-shaped window. There was a large opening in the floor through which a man came. Before she could see his face, she felt herself being pulled away. As she woke up, she saw Daniel holding the Heaven's Breath key and placing his free hand on her head. "Are you okay, Miss Cedar?" asked the doctor. "Yes, thank you, doctor," she said with a smile. "You remembered something?" asked Lucas eagerly. "Mr. Flynn," said Daniel in reprimand. "We must know," said Lucas again. Daniel scowled. "I don't know if it was a memory," confessed Jennifer. "It might have been a dream." "But it was about this shrine," guessed Lucas. Jennifer nodded. "This was not just a building on a hill," she said. "It was a tower." Lucas rushed to the center of the room and dusted the floor under the table. "A door that demon worshippers didn't discover?" asked Daniel. "That seems unlikely." A star-shaped pattern began to appear on the floor as the dust flew off the stone floor and clouded the air. Jennifer and Daniel coughed and tried to avoid breathing the fine dirt. "A door that they didn't know how to open is more likely," said Lucas as he pointed to the seal on the floor. "I don't know how to open it either," said Jennifer. Lucas pulled out his key and looked at the ground, hoping to discover its design. His eyes began glowing with his key. As Lucas watched, he could see the dust in the room lift up and fly out the window. It was as if his key was brushing it out of the way to show him something important. He saw the silhouette of a bearded man with a colorful robe and a pair of pointed slippers. The man's eyes were bloodshot, and he seemed to look about nervously as though he were being watched. After gazing through the star-shaped window that no longer existed, he walked toward the star shape in the floor center. He closed his eyes for a moment, but then opened them to reveal the same glow that occurred when using a divine key. The star stone in the center then sunk down and began twisting like a screw, lowering him into the chambers below. After a few moments, Lucas's vision ended and he returned to reality. Lucas looked at the star-shaped pattern again and scratched his head for a moment. "I hope it doesn't require the soul key," he said at last. He stood on the surface of the starstone and held his key. He closed his eyes and tried to focus. His eyes began glowing again. The ground began to shake. "Lucas!" shouted Daniel in a concerned voice. Lucas ignored him, and the ground continued to shake. After a few more seconds, the star stone suddenly sunk down, causing Lucas to lose his balance and fall into the dust on the floor beside it. Jennifer and Daniel watched in awe as the sunken stone began rotating and slowly moving further down. Though it continued moving, the floor had ceased shaking. "Jump on!" shouted Lucas. The three of them leapt onto the stone and were slowly lowered down into a tall chamber lined with old gears and mechanical parts. The air was stale, but there was no dust. Jennifer choked on the old air, but neither Lucas nor Daniel seemed to be affected by it. Slowly the starstone settled on the ground. The earth began to shake a bit as it pressed down into a pentagonal slot on the stone floor at the base. "Now what?" asked Daniel. "I remember this place," said Jennifer. The other two twisted around to face her in surprise. This was the first time she had admitted remembering something. The man that lived here was named Joshua. He was on the Council of Nine. Lucas's eyes widened at the mention of the Council of Nine. He recognized the term as the collective identity of the key-bearers in the Golden Age. "What happened to him?" asked Lucas. "He did something. Something he wasn't supposed to. The healer took his key afterwards," said Jennifer. She sighed and shook her head. "I'm sorry, that's all I know." "How are you suddenly remembering this?" asked Daniel. "I'm not remembering very much," said Jennifer, "and I don't know why that seems familiar." "That was 500 years ago, Jennifer," said Lucas slowly. "What?" asked Jennifer. "What are you saying?" "Your key," said Lucas. "It's the time key." "You mean to say that she is actually one of the Council of Nine, that has come back from the past?" asked Daniel. Lucas nodded. "Except I never thought a time key bearer could change time so that they could move quickly," he admitted. "What does this mean?" asked Jennifer. "I suppose it's just interesting right now," said Lucas. "Our goals are unchanged. We still want to get the keys and fight evil. In our time, we're trying to restore the Council and the Golden Age, but if we learn about your key, perhaps we can stop the Destroyer before it gets started. I don't know. Obviously, helping each other is still our best bet." Daniel and Jennifer looked at one another. Daniel seemed amazed to be in the presence of one of the actual Council of Nine. Jennifer seemed suddenly more out of place and lost. She wished she had the rest of her memories to guide her. "Come on," said Lucas enthusiastically. "Let's get the key." They quickly moved to a chamber where a large door appeared. They tried to push it in order to gain access, but none of them could move it. "Too bad Sig isn't here," said Lucas as he struggled to catch his breath. He examined the area around the door and found an odd set of canisters embedded in the wall. They were clear and revealed a green gel inside each of them. Lucas squinted his eyes as the gel seemed to move slightly. "Doctor, what is this?" asked Lucas. "If you don't know, then how am I?" started Daniel as he came close and began to examine the canisters. "Wait, these are biomass canisters." "Meaning these things are alive?" asked Lucas. Daniel tilted his head as he tried to think of a way to explain it. "Well, sort of," he said at last. "Think of a human arm. It's made up of bones and muscles and blood vessels and skin. Each of those things is made up of small organized groups of cells, which are each living things." "Wait, this isn't augment technology?" asked Lucas. "Not originally," explained Daniel. "This technology was developed to cure something called cancer in ancient times." "I've heard of cancer," said Lucas. "Mutated cells that attack healthy cells." "That's the basic idea," said Daniel. "So how do you attack a mutated cell without destroying the healthy cells?" That was a huge medical dilemma in ancient times, but the answer was to program simple biological entities to target the bad cells. "I've never heard of cancer," said Jennifer in a bored tone. "What does that have to do with this door?" "You said that the healer took away his key?" Lucas asked Jennifer. Jennifer nodded. "Yes, Timothy took it," she replied. "I happen to know, courtesy my own key, that it is on the other side of this door," explained Lucas. "I hypothesize that the healer locked it in a way that only he would be able to open it." "What does that mean?" asked Jennifer. "Dr. Young, would you please use your key to try to heal the contents of these canisters?" Daniel gave him a puzzled look, but finally nodded. He closed his eyes and held out his key. The canisters shattered as several large tentacle-shaped tendrils burst out and gripped the door, then yanked it open. Lucas smiled. Daniel looked in amazement at the biological engineering that had been implemented. Jennifer tried not to vomit as she looked at the grotesque tendrils. Lucas rushed inside and picked up the shining key that rested on a soft pillow in the chamber. "Good thing you came with us, Doctor," said Lucas. "Let's get out of here." The pentagonal star stone carried them up to the top of the Mine Shrine Tower and then locked into place. As soon as they reached the dusty room at the top, an eerie and familiar shriek echoed across the desert. Daniel and Lucas looked at one another in horror. It seemed they were being hunted by augments. Unfortunately, these were augments that already knew and hated them, making escape seem even more difficult. Though Jennifer had not been present during the assault on Epsilon 41's base, Lucas had been personally involved in beating the augment slavers and retrieving the key of origins. Only now they were caught off guard with fewer allies nearby and no radios to hack in order to mask their presence. "Row 82, said Lucas.